The Stranger at Midnight. It was close to midnight when Sophie first heard the knock at the door. She lived alone in a small, creaky houses at the edge of town. The streets were always quiet, especially at this time, and she wasn't expecting anyone. For a moment, she thought she imagined it a soft, barely audible knock. But then it came again, a little louder this time, steady and deliberate. Her heartbeat quickened. No one ever knocked on her door this late. Hesitantly, she tiptoed to the door, her fingers brushing over the cold metal of the handle. Through the peephole, she could barely make out the figure of a man, standing in the dim light of the porch. He wore a long, dark coat, and his face was hidden beneath the shadow of his hat. "Who's there?" Sophie called out, her voice trembling slightly. No response. Just silence, as if the man on the other side was waiting for her to act first. She hesitated, her instincts warning her to stay inside. But something about the figure was oddly familiar. Against her better judgment, she opened the door a crack. The man didn't step forward. He stood motionless, his head tilted slightly as if examining her. "Sophie?" He finally spoke, his voice calm, but with a hint of something darker. "Do you remember me?" She froze. There was something about his voice. It tugged at her memory, but she couldn't place it. "I don't think so," she said slowly, keeping the door only slightly ajar. "Do I know you?" The man smiled faintly, though it wasn't a friendly smile. "We've met before. A long time ago." Her heart raced now. She didn't like the way he was speaking, like he knew something she didn't. "I think you have the wrong house," she said, trying to close the door, but the man's hand shot out and stopped it. His grip was strong. "Listen to me, Sophie," he said, his voice now serious, almost urgent. "I know this sounds strange, but I don't have much time. You need to come with me. Right now." Her blood ran cold. Was this some kind of kidnapping attempt? But then his next words stunned her into silence. "You died, Sophie. 10 years ago." Her mind reeled. What was he talking about? She was alive, standing right there, wasn't she? "That's insane," she snapped, her fear turning into anger. "Get away from me," the man sighed, releasing the door slightly but not leaving. "You were in a car accident 10 years ago tonight. You hit a tree on Highway 27. Do you remember that road?" Sophie's breath caught in her throat. She did remember Highway 27. She hadn't driven down it in years because of the nightmares she had about crashing into something. But that didn't mean no, it couldn't be true. She was alive. "I survived," she whispered, trying to convince herself more than him. "I walked away from that crash." The man shook his head slowly. "No, you didn't. And you've been living in this place, thinking it's your life. But it's not. You're stuck here, Sophie. Stuck in a loop." Her legs felt weak. She backed away from the door, her mind spinning. Was he lying? Was this some cruel trick? But deep down, a memory stirred, something she had tried to bury for years. She remembered the crash, the screech of tires, the flash of headlights, and then nothing. Just darkness. "You're lying," she yelled, backing up further into the house. But the walls around her seemed to shift, the furniture suddenly strange, unfamiliar. The house she'd lived in for years felt like it was fading around her. "Sophie," the man said, stepping into the doorway now, his tone softening. "It's time. You can't stay here anymore. You need to move on." Tears welled up in her eyes as her mind unraveled. The memories came flooding back, now the crash, the silence, the feeling of being somewhere else, like she was stuck in a dream that never ended. "I'm dead?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. The man nodded, his face filled with a strange kind of compassion. "Yes, and you need to let go. You've been here long enough." Sophie's chest tightened. She didn't want to believe it. How could she be dead? She was standing here. She had a life, didn't she? But as she looked around, the houses began to blur, the walls fading into a gray mist. The man stepped forward, holding out his hand. "Come with me," he said gently. "It's time." With a shaky breath, Sophie looked at him, then back at the house that was slowly dissolving around her. She didn't understand everything, but deep down, she knew he was right. She had been stuck in this place, this half-existence, for too long. Slowly, she reached out and took his hand. As soon as their fingers touched, the world around her vanished into darkness. But it wasn't the cold, empty darkness she feared. It was soft, peaceful, and for the first time in years, she felt free. Together, they walked into the light.